Good evening from the News Radio, 1120 and 93.7 FM, KPNW studios. I am Zero Jones. I do the wake-up call 6 a.m. to 9 on KPNW, Monday through Friday, along with Gary Snyder, actually in Bill London. Anyway, you can also check us out online at kpnw.com if you really feel like it, because we now have this new interwebs thing. Have you heard of it? All right, tonight's news, the crazy news, is brought to you by our friend Sean Sutherland. He's at Ask Insurance. It's a great name because everybody has questions when it comes to insurance. So what do? You ask insurance and you get answers. That's what Sean does, provides answers, and he also provides solutions. Okay, let's get wacky. I'm starting to call this the Dan Rayfield template, and it goes something like this. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield has joined 20 other states in a new lawsuit against the Trump administration. Now I fill in the blanks. So this time, in an attempt to cut the quid pro quo language, as the state's putting it, added into federal grant agreements. Now the language requires the state to violate its sanctuary law by requiring information sharing with federal immigration officials in order to obtain, in this case, $18 million in crime victim dollars. Now, Rayfield joined a coalition of 21 attorneys general in sanctuary cities and states, suing over the language which impacts funds set to be released in October. Now, the Victims' Crime Act goes all the way back to 1984 under President Ronald Reagan, and it established grants programs to help states provide essential services to victims and survivors of violent crime. Well, the services include victim and witness advocacy, emergency shelter, medical expenses, crime scene cleanup, sexual assault, forensic exams, and funeral costs. Changes to the contract language comes as the Victim of Crime Act funding has actually been dwindling for years due to a reduction in its main revenue source, which is federal fees and fines for white-collar crimes. So changes in federal prosecution strategies favor settlement over putting somebody in jail, and that's reduced an overall reduction to the VOCA grants of about 40% last year. Now, Rayfield's office had asked the Oregon legislature to backfill that 40% cut, but, well, they didn't. Rayfield noted the lawsuit will not be resolved in time to stop about 150 organizations across the state that get VOCA funding from shuttering. Should be notable, well, it is notable, that the state of Oregon now has filed 36 lawsuits against the Trump administration, which is an average of 5 lawsuits filed every month since Trump took office back in January, and about 6 times as many as the state filed during his first term in 2017. All right, so this has to do with illegal immigrants and why, once again, Rayfield is suing. Well, Marion County here in Oregon, which is also the home of the state capital, Salem, has also filed a federal lawsuit. They filed it Monday because they say they want guidance over 5 immigration enforcement subpoenas that it's received and what their responsibilities are if federal and state laws clash. Marion County has asked a federal judge to clarify the law and what it requires, given the subpoenas and Oregon's conflicting sanctuary laws. They want clarity. And generally, Oregon sanctuary laws prohibit local law enforcement, county law enforcement, state law enforcement from cooperating with federal authorities with anything dealing with immigration enforcement. Same would go for cities and counties overall. And yes, even a law that passed that said landlords can't cooperate with the feds. Now, the county received these federal subpoenas on August 1st, and they wanted information on 4 illegal immigrants who are on parole for sex crimes. That's according to the lawsuit. They didn't identify the 5th individual, and who it is really isn't clear. The county had until Monday of this week to turn over the records, which included home addresses during their period of supervision, their phone numbers, their driver's license information. Yeah, in case you didn't know, Oregon will give a driver's license to anybody. And also, they wanted employment addresses and some other information. The lawsuit doesn't name who these perps are. Oregon Attorney Dan Rayfield said in a statement, though, that he will fight to uphold Oregon's sanctuary laws. Marion County officials say that what they're doing is they're seeking some sort of clarification on the legal requirements from both the state and federal officials. And they say, right now, ambiguity remains. Officials have said that they've collected the records that would be responsive to the subpoenas, which are public records. And they said, quote, they would be available to any person who makes a public records request. As the suspects, well, or as to them, and the suspects that the state of Oregon is trying to shield, who are they? Well, two of the individuals are level 1 sex offenders. That's the highest level of sex offense in Oregon. Their crimes involve rape, child sexual abuse. A third individual was convicted of sexual abuse, and a fourth was convicted of kidnapping and robbery. Oh, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. They have rights. So we had told you about the city of Grants Pass, and they took the state to court. They went to, of course, the U.S. Court of Appeals and took their case directly to the Supreme Court and won. And the case was all over, essentially trying to enforce rules dealing with homeless people in that city, which is down in southern Oregon. They won their lawsuit. So they started enforcing some of the rules that they had. And they got sued again. Well, now that lawsuit against the city of Grants Pass, which was filed by advocacy group Disability Rights Oregon, has been settled. Under the settlement, Grants Pass has to provide low-barrier shelter capacity for at least 150 homeless people, and they cannot impose any limitations beyond safety requirements for entering. So they can go in drunk, they can go in high, they can go in, as long as they're not hurting somebody, they can be there. Also, that site has to be ADA compliant. It has to provide drinking water. It has to have shade. It has to have toilets. And Grants Pass also paid $85,000 to Disability Rights Oregon to put in a trust account. And what this means is, finally, Grants Pass can now enforce camping regulations until they likely get sued again. So based on current trends, Oregon is going to lose some clout in Congress in about 4.5 years. Namely, their 6th congressional district seat. Oregon, as it turns out, are bleeding residents who are leaving the state for greener grass, and that loss of population is noticeable enough that the state's going to lose a seat in Congress, which is going to be pretty interesting, because that is going to set up a fierce primary battle between current incumbent Congress members Val Hoyle, Janelle Bynum, and Andrea Salinas, because one of them is going to be merged into the other seat. That should be fun to watch. Then there's the question, well, after so much growth, why are people leaving? Well, maybe there is an answer buried in a new study by Consumer Affairs. They maybe proffer certain reasons. This year, Consumer Affairs ranked Oregon the 4th worst state to move to in 2025, which is worse than its 24 ranking as 7th worst. We're number 4. We're number 4. See, the way I look at it, in 2 years, there's no reason we can't be number 1. Oregon scored poorly for affordability, safety, its economy, education, and access to health care. According to the report, Oregon is the third worst for affordability, and ninth worst for safety. It's also among the most vulnerable to drought and wildfire. Well, deja vu, just this time in somebody else's backyard. We followed the story of the Eugene Emeralds minor league baseball team, and they were trying to cop tourism dollars from Lane County's hotel room tax, which is meant, like I said, for tourism, to help pay for their $100 million new stadium they wanted to build in Eugene. And they even, also wanted taxpayers to get in on the fun and help fund this $100 million new stadium. So after Eugene residents said, no, we're not going to vote to pay for that, the Emeralds have been searching for a new home. And this time they're trying it down south in Medford. And it almost seems like they're making exactly the same plays. And in Jackson County, which is where Medford is located, the tourism industry there is pushing back against a plan that has been floated by the Medford City Council to raise the city's lodging tax to pay for an expensive minor league baseball stadium for the Emeralds. The hoteliers argue that the lodging tax is meant as a way to increase hotel stays in tourism, which is something they say won't happen with a minor league baseball team, which was one of the arguments that people around Eugene were making. So the current Eugene Emeralds baseball team is doing their best to try and relocate to Medford after Eugene voters scuttled the whole thing. Now, if you recall, back in the day, the Emeralds also lobbied the Lane County Board of Commissioners to give them a big fat chunk of the Lane County Fairgrounds to put their new stadium. Well, the Oregon Department of Human Services is forming a team, and that team is going to be there to reduce mistakes on SNAP benefits. That, according to a report from the governor's office, Tina Kotek. So as part of President Donald Trump's spending bill, states with error rates in their SNAP benefits above certain thresholds are going to be required to cover a percentage of SNAP benefits. So errors are things like giving SNAP benefits to people that don't deserve them, or giving more SNAP benefits than someone is eligible for. So based on our current Oregon error rates, which have been going on for a long time, the state is going to be responsible for paying back about $500 million every 2 years. Oregon's 2024 SNAP administrative error rate of 14.06% actually ranks as the 8th highest in the nation. We're number 8. And if we don't want to pay any increased costs, well, then the state is going to have to bring that number below 6% under the new federal rules. So without that, Oregon would have to pay 75% of administrative costs for running SNAP in the state about every 2 years to the tune of $500 million. The federal government historically covered all of those administrative costs, or at least half of them, but the Trump administration decided that it was time to shift all of that to state funding if a program is rife with overuse and or fraud and or just shoddy bookkeeping. Yeah, this has been happening for years in Oregon. And now that the president and the Republicans in Congress have decided, you know what, we shouldn't foot the bill for it. Now, it looks like there's a very good chance Oregon will be footing the bill for their mistakes. So here's a little irony for you. The Oregon Department of Transportation is funding a high-visibility seat belt enforcement event that started on Monday and goes through the 31st. And because of that, and they do this all over the state. So in this case, Eugene police are going to provide additional enforcement during that period. And also, some of those officers may be receiving overtime. Eugene's traffic safety unit says, yeah, they're going to be out, and they're going to be there through Labor Day. The safety unit and other participating law enforcement agencies around the state say they will be taking a no-excuses approach to seatbelt law enforcement, and they will write citations day and night, their words. Seatbelt violation in Oregon is $150. So there's two things here. One, I chuckle because they say, oh, we're going to be giving out tickets day and night. You ever tried to see into somebody else's car at night when you're driving? Good luck. The other irony is that the Oregon Department of Transportation is able to come up with these funds at a time when they say they can't fix potholes, that they're not going to be able to maintain roads during the winter and clear ice and snow, and they're going to lay off 500 people unless the legislature meets in a special session and gives them a lot of money. Then where is this money coming from? And how can they afford to pay it? It is kind of humorous that they're saying they can't afford to pay their employees, but they can afford to pay the employees of law enforcement agencies around the country or around the state to go out and give tickets to people who are not wearing seat belts. That special session, by the way, is coming up August 31st here in Oregon, and it's going to cost Oregonians a lot of extra money. But ODOT's out of money, except they have this money. They've got that money. We can't pay anybody, but we got that money. All right, your Crazy Oregon News has been brought to you by Sean Sutherland. He's at Ask Insurance. Give him a call when you have questions. All right, Rick, roll out the reel.